You're in the 06010. Fantasy Focus.
Welcome to Fantasy Focus. Today's podcast is presented by Geico. You can watch us every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube feeds, as well as the ESPN app. And you can download Fantasy Focus wherever you get your podcasts. We say hello on this Monday, November 8th. Field, Matthew, Stephania, and Daniel here to recap everything we saw from Week 9 so far, with one game left to play tonight. The Steelers and the Bears. Will address that later on in the show. A big one. And what a weird week it was, Matthew.
Dude, I mean, like, that doesn't even scratch the surface of what kind of week this was.
So bizarre.
So bizarre. So I tweeted this out last night. at Matthew Berry TMR. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but I'm on the Twitter. Anyway, so here's what I tweeted out. I want to read it exactly because I think this is insane. I think this is indicative of what kind of week it was. Okay? At the start of Week 9, Josh Johnson was the third-string quarterback on the Jets. No,
right.
Zach Wilson, Mike White started on Thursday night.
Maybe even the fourth string, because you thought maybe Joe Flacco.
Maybe Joe Flacco, right. So whatever. Josh
Johnson.
Johnson was on his couch a month ago, right? So Josh Johnson doesn't start the game on Thursday night, but he gets into the game because Mike White gets injured. He finishes with 24.8 fantasy points.
Wow,
ESPN standard scoring. Yeah. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes.
They're amazing.
The top two quarterbacks drafted in fantasy football this year.
Awesome players.
Josh Allen had 9.5 fantasy points. Patrick Mahomes 10.4. Combined, they had 20 fantasy points, or 4.8 less points less. They combined for 4.8 points less than Josh Johnson, than the backup quarterback of the Jets. That's
Daniel,
Week 9.
This is what I get for reading Love Hate.
I know.
Right? I mean, I read about Josh Allen. He's going to just trample the just lifeless Jaguars, 14-point favorites.
I loved Matthew Stafford this week.
Don't
I
do
loved
this to
Devontae. I hated Devontae Smith this week.
Okay, stop it. No more.
I thought Boston Scott was going to be a decent play.
You know why? Because you had logic, Matthew. That's why you didn't like some of those players. This is what fantasy football is in a nutshell.
But it was the most bizarre.
It was a weird week. How
super
are you supposed
weird.
to you're kicking yourself in a week in which the Chiefs scored one touchdown.
Yeah.
The Packers scored one touchdown and almost won a game against the Chiefs in which they looked awful on offense.
Awful.
We had the Bills who lose 9-6 to the Jaguars. They were 14-point favorites. The Bills, who are, by many people's estimation, the favorites in the AFC. The Titans, without the most dominant running back in the league, go and curb stomp the Rams in Los Angeles last night. Football is upside down right now.
They
remove off the hook.
They remove Odell Beckham Jr. from the Browns, and clearly he was the issue on defense because the Browns defense shut down Joe Burrow and the Bengals passing attack. All of a sudden, Jamar Chase, who's been nothing short of a revelation all season long, gets the yips and has some drops.
Oh my God!
Back to preseason Jamar. Everything upside. Brown is white. Black is yellow. Cats are playing with dogs. It was insanity.
It was insanity. So let's get to all the information that we may have learned yesterday. And probably the only thing that we can count on is reliable information, because some stuff is not predictable going forward. What do you want to say?
I was just going to say one last thing. I just wanted to add just one thing. Okay, so just sort of recap the crazy week, right? So as we just said, Bills lost.
Okay.
Cowboys got stomped at home, right? Yep. Cowboys lost. Rams lost. Bengals lost. Raiders lost.
Packers.
Packers lost, right? Rams lost. But you know who didn't lose? The Washington football team and the Detroit Lions, baby. That's right. Let's go. Let's go. Here we go.
It's amazing.
One pride. Hail to the Washington football team.
It is amazing that Daniel's Detroit Lions could literally make up ground on the rest of the division this weekend without actually playing a game. Meanwhile, the Washington football team, they didn't make up ground on the New York Giants, but still, they're closer to the Cowboys than they were going into the action yesterday.
Right.
All right, so weird week, but let's get to the stuff that is pretty concrete in terms of the information. And that is why we bring aboard Stephania Bell. And Stephania, let's go through some of the injuries from Sunday. Matthew Stafford came into this game after missing practice Wednesday and Thursday. Sean McVay sort of downplayed it. No issues with that back. But from the moment that game began last night, something just looked amiss with Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, he really didn't look like himself. He just looked sort of off, kind of uncomfortable. He's never one to make an excuse for injuries or how he feels, but it just made you wonder if it was part of the reason that they looked out of sync. And then to add a little more injury to the insult of the game, he ends up rolling his ankle later and looked uncomfortable right when it happened, sort of limped to the sideline, but came right back in. After the game, his really deep quote to the media was, "It's fine. It'll be all right. I just rolled it on myself," really. Sean McVay sounded a little bit more concerned, kind of blamed himself for the play on which it happened in that rollout. But ultimately, the fact that he came back in was a good sign, but don't be surprised if you see him on the injury report for his ankle now as well.
Sounds like he'll be good to go in Week 10, but we'll monitor it just in case. Another quarterback that got banged up, he left and then returned, is Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence left also with what they officially called a low ankle sprain, sort of your garden variety lateral ankle sprain, and really didn't miss much time at all. I think afterward, again, player versus coach. I mean, Trevor Lawrence made it sound like it wasn't a big deal. Urban Meyer said he wanted him to go get it x-rayed before he came in to speak to the media. And Trevor said, we got it scanned. There doesn't seem to be anything major there, but we'll just see how it goes throughout the week. Yes, we know x-ray machines at the stadium aren't the most reliable, so just keep an eye on this. But he did return to the game. He did finish it out.
And, of course, as we just said, the Jaguars won that game 9-6 without James Robinson. Stephania, this is not a new injury, but any additional updates based off what we heard yesterday morning?
Well, he was inactive after being questionable with a bruised heel, but he did go out and do a workout, and it was sort of interesting. Again, Urban Meyer with his cryptic remarks, but saying he thought he would have James Robinson available until that morning. Robinson, according to Mike DeRocco, who covers the team for us, he saw him doing some individual drills, kind of light running on his own. Then he did a workout for the medical staff. And after they all left that workout collectively, the decision was made to hold him out for this week, but they are already expecting him to be available Week 10.
If he's not, we know who the next man up is. It's Carlos Hyde, who had 21 of their 22 running back carries yesterday. Didn't do a whole lot with them, but he'll be on waivers this week. I think you would be smart to add him just because we don't know if James Robinson will for certain play in Week 10. Zack Moss left the game yesterday for the Bills to find the same game where the Bills, they couldn't run the football at all yesterday.
3 carries for 6 yards for Zack Moss, not the stat line you want to see. Did leave with a head injury, had been listed as questionable for return, but ultimately ruled out in the fourth quarter.
Devin Singletary, worth checking on waivers. He's available in about 42% of leagues. I think you would see his role tick upwards. But again, they can't run the ball right now.
Yeah, but he's a nice pass catcher, and as bad as the Bills' offense looked last week, this Sunday against the Jaguars, and honestly, they looked pretty bad for much of the game against Miami the week before.
They did, yeah.
You have to feel like they're gonna get it figured out. That they will. I mean, you have to
maybe.
Yeah, I get it. That's too bad. A bad game and a half against defenses they should have throttled. But ultimately, I think there's a larger body of work here between, and Josh Allen and that offensive system here that if Devin Singletary is available in your league and Zack Moss were to miss time, to me, he would be very much roster worthy in a week in which, candidly, there's not a lot on the waiver wire. I am glad I don't have have to waiver wire column this week.
There are a couple names that slid under 50%
really?
that have surprised you.
Well,
Brandon
I
Ayuk, I'm looking at you. Football historically tends to be like a pendulum for those that are watching the live stream. And, there are things that we have talked about as if they've been revolutionary in terms of offensive concepts. When you go back and it's like, I always think about the Bills running the K-gun offense. And it's like some of the stuff that we see happening right now, like the Bills are doing then too, right? The reason I bring this up is that like prolonged stretches of offensive dominance doing the same thing over and over again tend to eventually come to an end. And I'm not saying that the Bills or the Chiefs are no longer able to play at an extremely high level. The Bills have on multiple occasions this year. I just think it's also fair to wonder if teams are catching up a little bit. Like the antidote appears to be when you're playing Kansas City or Buffalo, you got to rush with 4, you got to play 2 deep safeties a ton, and you got to say, if you're going to beat us with the death by 1,000 paper cuts approach. And teams would rather lose that way than lose with Josh Allen throwing 3 touchdowns of 50-plus yards in a game.
Which is fair, and I'm glad you brought up the Chiefs as well, because to me, I think that's the bigger concern. We'll get to that in a minute here. But, yeah, there's no doubt. But it's, to your point, it's a chess match. Okay, we dominate for a while. Defenses figure out how to stop us. We catch it up. Okay, now we tinker. Right. Like, Josh Allen isn't just a one-trick pony. The Bills aren't just a one-trick pony. Right, exactly. They've got a lot of weapons there. It's a smart coaching staff. They'll be like, okay, you're going to do that, then we're going to do this. And, it's a chess match. And to your point. And so In times like this, I tend to, and I think you're the same way, ultimately you bet on talent.
Sure.
Right?
Totally.
And we agree that the Bills are one of the most talented offensive teams in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think on Wednesday of this week, we're going to talk a little bit more depth on those two teams specifically on just what do you do, right? Like, because you drafted all of the top players, whether it's Stephon Diggs or Josh Allen high in your draft, Patrick Mahomes, and obviously Tyreek Hill, and obviously Travis Kelce, and maybe Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, those players were all drafted probably within the first 4 rounds of your league.
Sure.
What do you do with them going forward? We'll discuss that in sort of a deeper dive. Stephania, the Patriots won again yesterday, but it did not come without a cost as their 2 top running backs, Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, both got banged up.
Yeah, they both left in the fourth quarter with head injuries, so you have to assume concussion protocol for both of them, but certainly problematic since we can't put a definitive timetable on this. And here you go with both Harris and Stevenson dealing with the same issue.
Yeah, so no J.J. Taylor on the active roster yesterday. It was just Brandon Bolden left over. Early sense I get is, I haven't heard much on Harris, but Stevenson could be okay here. We'll find out. We'll talk about this tomorrow on the waiver wire, Matthew, because I have Stevenson on there, sort of a preview. The logic is that, if both he and Harris play, then it's going to be Damian Harris as the guy. But Stevenson looked really good yesterday.
Stevenson looked really good. He's
Over
a guy that
100
looked
yards,
really,
yeah.
He looked really good in the preseason as well. He's shown flashes throughout this year, and as the Patriots are starting to get better, like give Bill Belichick credit in that team. Like they're playing tough. They're getting a lot better. Nice win last week as well when they went on the road to Los Angeles and beat the Chargers. And so, Bill is having to change things up a little bit. He's never been a guy that has tended to love rookie running backs, but when you're looking around, like, I'm trying to win some games here. And so Stevenson, I think, is somebody that needs to be rostered in a lot of leagues, regardless of what happens this week, just because I think of the upside of him and the fact the Patriots do like to use multiple backs. And with Mac Jones under center, they're going with a more run-heavy approach this year than they have under Tom Brady.
Yeah, we can later in the week discuss what would happen if both Harris and Stevenson look unlikely to play. If both of them play, we know it's Damian Harris you prefer. But if only Stevenson plays this weekend, then he could be a top 20-ish consideration, I would think, right?
Easily. I think you'd see J.J. Taylor active. You'd see some Brandon Bolden in there. But Stevenson, I think, would be those Patriots running back you'd want to start. Be interesting to see if they activate anyone off the practice squad or if they bring in anyone this week for tryouts. And kick the tires on anyone as well. But so that's a story we'll follow throughout the week. Stephania didn't remind you of this, but I will. That concussions are nonlinear injuries.
Yeah, correct. That's a good point, Matthew.
Yeah.
We'll find out whether.
Well,
the players...
listen, I'm the concussion guy on the show.
We'll
you
figure
understand
out
what I'm saying.
It's
okay, Stephania, I got it. Don't worry about it.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, guy, I got it. Don't you worry about it.
There aren't a ton of injuries related to your head. So you would think that you think there's a chance both will enter the concussion protocol. We will find out probably as soon as Wednesday.
Field, really quickly, going to chime in with a quick comment from our YouTube stream. Kelly says, OMG, who is picking Field's clothes? He's wearing pajamas again?
Yeah.
Why are you wearing pajamas again? It's Monday.
OMG, who is picking your clothes?
Who's picking your clothes?
I mean, I'm wearing pajamas.
Are you wearing pajamas today?
Kelly says you're wearing pajamas.
I'm not picking. I'm not wearing pajamas.
You're not? It sure does look like you're wearing pajamas.
Really?
I can't really tell. I'm colorblind, so.
It's a sweatshirt from the fine folks at Boathouse, as you can see right here. I don't know. It's just like a sweatshirt, but it's very comfortable. Is that why she thinks it's a pajama?
Maybe it's because you're the buttoned up one that anytime you dress down, it just looks like she.
That's true. There's a certain level of expectation that you or I, Daniel, never meet.
No.
Right. They're just like, okay, well, those two are slobs. Like
Fall
we sort of
well below
right.
it.
Yeah, we're like. We're not. The fact that those two guys show up dressed is a positive, and anything we get after that is gravy. Stephania always looks like $1 million, so it's really Field who is sort of the fashion spirit animal of the 06010.
That's accurate.
I like this sweatshirt a lot.
It's a great
Thank you,
sweatshirt.
Daniel.
It is.
But I like you introducing this. Hearing from Kelly, who's watching on the YouTube live stream, I like this as a new segment where we get into fights with commenters. Right. I like that. I like the idea of every day let's get into a fight with a commenter on YouTube.
Instigator or
yeah, no,
anything.
today
No.
it's Kelly. Today it's Kelly from YouTube versus Field Yates and his pajamas. and I like this. Let's battle
Good job.
royale.
Kelly says last week he had on some winter top that looked like pajamas too.
I'm with you, Kelly.
Wow.
So
I appreciate
I'm
that.
hashtag
I just
Team Kelly
appreciate
here.
that Kelly is paying
Fun Shirt
attention
Friday
to
on
the
Friday.
wardrobe
Also,
choices
loyal
and-
watcher, Kelly.
loyal.
Thank you for
Yeah,
tuning
that's
in.
right.
Seriously.
No, I honestly I suppose I'm supposed to be like partly offended right now, but I just love the loyalty here. Like thank you, Kelly. I'm gonna wear something
Appreciate that.
completely ridiculous every day now going forward, just to see what kind of reaction I can generate
Love
out
it.
of Kelly from YouTube.
But I'm just trying to think of like how I could help Field fight back against Kelly because we don't know anything other like. Yeah, we'll stop watching cat videos, or I don't know. Who knows what her search history is?
I
Like,
think
who
what
knows?
the next thing is Kyle Field. Why don't you wear some real pajamas this week?
You know what?
There we go,
that's
and
what
we'll
you
see
gotta do.
if Kelly catches
actually not
on.
really a pajamas guy. Like,
Oh,
is that?
whoa!
Okay, well,
Oh,
let's
TMI.
just move on
I
to
just mean,
Christian
like, I just
McCaffrey
wear-
returning from injury this
No, I
week.
just wear shorts. I just wear
Okay.
shorts to bed.
You wear
Oh,
shorts.
okay,
gym shorts.
okay.
Daniel and I
Gosh.
over here, we just
Oh no! You guys
I
get your
got
mind out of
nervous.
the gutter. I just wear gym shorts. No big deal. Is
By
there
the
any?
way, who? I mean, that's what I do too.
Yeah. Do you wear pajamas? Do you like?
No, I either wear sweatpants or shorts, depending
I'm
on
so
the time.
ready. Hey guys, let's talk about Christian
Depending on-
McCaffrey coming back from injury.
Depending
We
on the
don't.
time of the year.
don't-
I swear, no one
Okay.
wanted all of this.
Matthew and I.
You know who
very
wanted
normal
this?
People.
Kelly didn't.
Kelly for
did not
you
want-
too.
Classic case of who done it, and the answer is Kelly.
Yeah.
I don't
you
know
go.
whether Christian McCaffrey wears pajamas or not. Maybe he's a shorts guy. Who knows? But I will say this, Stephania. I give the Panthers very little credit for anything they did yesterday offensively, other than the way that they managed Christian McCaffrey. I thought this was a
Amen.
masterclass in using him the right way.
Well, I think we talked about it a lot, and I'm glad. I'm glad that they did what we wanted them to do, which was not abuse him out of the gate and have him carrying the volume of work that he's normally responsible for. We've seen him last year when he came back to a very heavy workload. So yesterday, Christian McCaffrey, obviously a nice stat line, 106 yards, 4 catches on the day. He only played just slightly under 50% of the snaps, 47.4% of the snaps, 18 touches. We've talked about that stat of him having usually 23 touches a game. So it was down a little bit, 14 carries, 4 catches. So I think it was a good introduction for Christian McCaffrey. And now the next step is, how does he feel 1 to 2 days later? That's always the big test after you make your first appearance. So far, so good for CMC.
I got to tell you something, Matthew. This is a reminder of why he's just different than everybody else, right?
Sure.
And maybe other than Derrick Henry. But this is why the two of them are in like this class unto themselves. He plays 50% of the snaps, and he has 14.6 fantasy points. Like, it was
Against a good defense.
against a good defense too. Yeah, and he got nothing on the ground basically. So it was great to see. Stephania gave all the sort of the playtime percentages. I thought he looked good. Like there was, like, the Panthers are terrible offensively right now. They're just terrible. Sam Darnold needs to be benched, to be honest with you. But
And
the offensive
they're getting no help from the offensive
right.
line.
The offensive line's no good. Like the 14 carries for 52 yards. Like, I don't think that would have changed. Maybe if it was Derrick Henry, but like there aren't too many running backs who are turning those 14 carries into like 80 yards yesterday. Like
Correct.
I thought Christian McCaffrey got generally what he should have gotten yesterday based off of watching it while we were watching a bunch of games yesterday. Looked good in the passing game. Good to see CMC back. I hedged a bit in my rankings this week because of the potential for a reduced playtime. I will, move him closer to RB1 this week when, again, it's where he typically will wind up every single week. Stephania, Dak Prescott came back yesterday from injury. I think a lot of people wanted to make this into Dak struggled because of his health. I'm not so sure about that.
No, he felt fine, and he addressed that afterward. He said he felt fine moving, scrambling. He clearly was able to test the calf. He didn't even feel it during the game. I think he was more upset with how the game played out and how the offense looked overall. But as far as from an injury perspective, there was really nothing there.
Yeah, you know what the issue was? The Broncos defense. That was the issue. Broncos defense. Credit to you,
dominated.
man. What a great win that was yesterday by Denver.
Dominated from
Unbelievable.
start to finish.
Yeah.
Look, I like to make fun of the Washington football team quite a bit, but honestly, the Washington football team played better against Denver. They still
did.
lost too, but they played better against Denver last week than Dallas did again. I mean, Denver just came into Cowboy Stadium and stomped them.
Yeah. It was super
curb stomped
impressive.
them. Super
Tough
impressive.
day for Survivor Leagues yesterday, right? Oh,
I can't even imagine what
Cowboys, Bills.
Cowboy. I mean, I would assume the Bill people just took a bath on Bills versus
Oh, my God,
Jaguars, and I would think yes, Cowboys Broncos was another big
Taking
one
a bath
as well.
is a bad thing, right, Matthew?
Well, like
no,
taking a
and-
bath, like it's a real estate term, right? Like if you buy a
Yes.
house for a certain amount of money and then you end up having to sell it for dramatically less because the market changed. Like I took a bath on that one,
Right.
right? Like,
You're like 12 years old.
That's-
How are you explaining
really interesting.
marketology to me? I don't understand
no,
this.
because I pay attention to stuff. I follow
yeah.
Matthew on TikTok. He
There you
describes it
go.
often there.
Thank you very much. I break it down
I
in
didn't know
between
it's called
dances.
taking a bath. I've heard about it being underwater, but I guess
I've never
it's
heard
sort
it
of
called
an
taking a
extension.
bath.
Listen,
Yeah.
I
never
West
heard
Coast,
that
I have so
phrase,
much
taking a
time in the
bath?
morning to read up on things like the market because
That
I
is
just
a-
roll out of bed and wear my pajamas to work.
That
That's how I
is-
find time to learn about
Hey,
taking a bath.
Kelly from YouTube, you've heard the phrase "taking a bath," right? Thirsty Kyle, I want to poll. Have you heard the phrase? In terms of taking a big and when it means taking a big loss.
Sure.
Taking a bath.
I know
yes,
it
like
for the
exactly.
record.
Why is
You've
that a
heard
negative though?
Thirsty
Isn't-
Kyle,
that
you've
should
heard
be a
of it,
I
right?
know.
positive. Taking a bath is always a good thing. Anyways, let's keep going. I'm sorry.
And then putting on your pajamas.
Dak looked tough yesterday.
Yeah.
It's a rare, uncharacteristic outing for Dak. He will be fine going forward.
And by the
only thing-
way, I mean, he still wound up with almost 19 fantasy points.
Yeah,
It was all
totally.
junk time.
Right,
I mean,
totally.
Dallas got curb stomped here, but like,
it was 2 2-point conversions, which is great.
right.
Plus 2 passing touchdowns. I'll say
Right,
this.
to a guy that no one started in any league
You
ever.
didn't have Malik Turner?
I did not have
One of your
Malik
best
Turner.
ball lineups?
No, yeah.
I will say this, though. It is interesting because we've talked about this recently, too. Another quarterback that's just not running anymore, Dak.
No.
He had 16 rushing yards yesterday. He has 20 or fewer in 6 of his 7 games this season and 0 rushing touchdowns. Remember, pendulums, right? Like,
Pendulums,
I
yeah.
think some of those quarterbacks that are living from the pocket are starting to emerge again, right? I mean, in terms of fantasy and also in how they're being used within their offense. Here was a good thing.
Here's another shocking, like we didn't even mention in all the shockingness, but shockingness, whatever. It's language. English is my
English.
second language.
Are you sure it's second?
Maybe.
I'm
But
not
Matt
convinced it's
Ryan,
second.
Matt Ryan against the Saints, a team that normally owns him,
Yeah. Looked really
had a
good.
great game.
Totally.
With
He
no
looked
Calvin
really good.
Ridley.
Looked
With no
really
Calvin
good.
Ridley against the Saints team that normally owns him, Matt Ryan looked awesome yesterday,
Yeah.
and there was a big win for them.
Huge win. They're 4-4. They have the 7th seed right now in the NFC. We're only halfway there, but the Falcons are at least in the
Falcons
mix.
are in the hunt.
They are in
They're
the
in the hunt.
They are in the hunt. It's amazing.
Cordero Patterson for MVP.
So good. Stephania, one thing that did work out well for your 49ers yesterday was George Kittle looked like George Kittle
Yeah.
yesterday in his return.
Way to try and find the bright spots in what was just a miserable outing by the 49ers. But George Kittle, coming back from the calf injury, did look good. And, I think that this was more towards what Shanahan had said midweek about George Kittle, that it's hard to stop a tight end, that you basically let them go and they play all the time. I figured that George Kittle would be heavily involved. He was involved early and often in the game. He led San Francisco in targets with 5, catches with 4, yards with 57, and had the only score in the first half. So George Kittle looked good, and he appeared to me to get stronger as the game went on. He had a fumble in there, very uncharacteristic of him. I think that might have just been a combination of rust and, the balls weren't always thrown where they needed to be. But George Kittle looked very George Kittle-like, and that's a strength for the offense.
Yeah,
And by the way, sorry, go ahead.
I was
Field.
just going to say, like, we had recently been like, it's hard to have George Kittle inside your top 3 of tight ends. It's also hard to have him, like, outside your top 6 because there are 0 tight ends that matter again this year. So he had fallen a little bit, but not that far.
Yeah. Stephania, I'm curious, and we can get into this more tomorrow as well because I think it's an interesting subject, right? But so I assume Field Brandon Ayuk made your waiver wire column as well.
He actually
Nice to
might
see
have a
him.
case
Big
for leading the way.
big game for Brandon Ayuk yesterday, which was nice to see. Obviously, big game for George Kittle. And I wonder, Field and Stephania, I asked this to both of you as the writer of the waiver wire column and as a diehard 49ers fan. Do we see Trey Lance next week or something? Because here's what. Hang on. You say not a chance. I'm just going to tell you something. The 49ers who basically went all in on this year in terms of the way they've structured their contracts, and we've talked about this somewhat on the show, but like you guys just lost to Colt McCoy, to a Colt McCoy-led team that didn't have DeAndre Hopkins. Bad loss within the division. I mean, at this point, you sit there and you look at the rest of the division, I feel, to me, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm the 49ers, you think about this is look in the mirror time. This is gut check time going like, you know what? It ain't our year.
Yeah, well,
We need to start building for the future. And you know what? Trey Lance needs reps.
I think no chance. Fine, you can tell me if I'm wrong here,
No,
but
I'm with
he's not even
Field.
close to ready, man.
No, he's
like
not
Kyle's
close
been
to
so
It doesn't
clear
solve
with that.
the problem, and there are a massive amount of problems. And yeah, we get into it tomorrow, but this is not entirely on the quarterback either.
I'm not saying that. I'm just I agree with you. He's not ready, but I'm just, you know how he gets ready? By getting reps.
Well, the
like
other
if you
thing,
lost the year, then you're like, we might as well get this guy some game time.
The counterpoint might be that you owe your first round pick this year already to Miami. Like if you bottom out because Trey Lance is not ready and you go 5-12 this year, and that pick goes from let's say you finish the season at pick 16 or something with Jimmy G, because by the way, they're still in the hunt in the NFC.
Right.
Versus like pick 8.
They
it's a huge difference. Huge difference.
You look at like Arizona. The Rams only have one win in the division, and they play the Rams twice more. They haven't played them yet. So it sounds crazy, but as Field said, outside of the Cardinals, it's a bit of a mix-up.
It just feels like we are trying to make something happen that the head coach is giving zero indication is close to happening. Maybe I'm way wrong, but we'll keep our eyes on whether the Trey Lance buzz builds in the next few weeks. One more, Stephania, here on the injury front in terms of returning players. Kenny Galladay was back for the Giants yesterday, supposedly.
Yeah, didn't do a ton. 2 for 28, only 2 targets thrown his way, but he was there.
Disappointing start to his Giants tenure. They get a great win, though. The Giants got a great win. Gut check opportunity against the Raiders. Very impressive.
Just to give you some behind-the-scenes stuff, we were having a pre-show meeting. I know you listen to this show and you're like, you guys don't actually plan this out. And not really. I mean, it's mostly like we sort of giggle with each other for a couple of minutes before the show. But one thing we did talk about is like we were going to do, big name stars returning from injury. And we had Dak Prescott, obviously. We had George Kittle. We had Chris McCaffrey. And then we had a debate as to whether or not Kenny Galladay was a big enough star to qualify for big names returning from injury. I mean, and he's still a big name. He signed a $72 million contract in the offseason, but as far as a fantasy star goes, he's nowhere close.
Not even close right now. It's too bad. I mean, the Giants have so many skilled players on offense that can command attention, but they're never healthy on the field together. And it feels like right now the most dynamic one is clearly Kadarius Toney. We will discuss the impact of some long-term changes, including not having Derrick Henry, in a minute. But first, do you own or rent your home?
Sure.
Sure you do, and I bet it can be hard work, but it's easy. Bundling policies with Geico. Geico makes it easy to bundle your homeowners or renters insurance along with your auto policy, and it's a good thing, too, because you already have so much to do around your home. Go to geico.com, get a quote, and see how much you could save. It's Geico easy. Visit geico.com today. That's geico.com.
Football and basketball seasons are back, and best of all, the safe return of live events means you can actually be there to see all the action with Vivid Seats. From seats on the 50-yard line to a bird's eye view to parking passes, being there is all that matters. And get this, with Vivid Seats rewards, you can earn rewards like free tickets. All you have to do is collect stamps, redeem, and repeat. It's that easy. So grab your tickets today and cheer on your favorite team from the stands. Events for every fan. Visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats. Experience it live.
Time now for us to dive into what happens when Derrick Henry goes down. You suppose the Titans probably fold, right? Especially going on the road to play the previously 7-1 Los Angeles Rams, a team that had been so good so far this year. Not so fast, my friends, as the Titans get another dominant win. The NFL is different than college football in the sense that in college football, it's about resume, and certainly wins and losses and all that matters, but it's also about how you do it. In the NFL, it's just wins and losses. If the NFL adopted a college football playoff ranking system, the Titans are at worst number 2 in the NFL right now, and maybe number 1 with the way that they just keep taking every challenge that comes their way and winning. But as far as we're concerned here in fantasy football, it's not exactly here nor there. But let's talk about the running backs. We'll talk about Ryan Tannehill in a second, Matthew, but I think people really are curious about the running backs. And last night what we saw was Jeremy McNichols with 3 catches, 35 yards, 6.5 fantasy points, and he led the way with 25 snaps. Adrian Peterson had 18 total snaps. He had 26 yards. He had a catch. Plus, he ends up with the late touchdown that could have easily been Jeremy McNichols if he had cashed in on one of those goal-to-go carries. What did you make of this backfield last night? Did it play out about how you expected?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Mike Vrabel said earlier in the week that, hey, multiple teams use multiple running backs. I'll be honest, I thought McNichols would be involved more than he was. I didn't think Deontay Foreman would be involved as much as he was. He got a decent amount of snaps as well and run. He was third on the team, but still, he was out there. He was out there and he was touching the ball, and they were using some in pass pro. So it was very surprising to me, and I think what I thought was going to happen last night was that McNichols would be the lead running back, both not only in terms of snaps played, which he was, but also in terms of like touches and fantasy points, which he was not.
Well, yeah, a couple of things though.
And well, yes, I know where you're going. Game script was part of it, but
Yes.
but also
Huge part of it, right?
Yeah, a huge part of it. I mean, like he was in there for the entire third down. If they were trailing, they needed to pass more, they would have. But Vrabel talked about this during the week about how a lot of NFL teams use multiple guys to carry the load, and that this is something we're looking at, and it's not going to just be one guy. And so this is what we sort of expected. Like Derrick Henry is a different human being than pretty much every other person on the planet, and so replacing Derrick Henry with just one guy, you can't do it. And that the Titans didn't even try. So you got Peterson, who looked like Adrian Peterson, looked like a slower, older version of Adrian Peterson, right? And McNichols looked good, but they weren't able to run much against the Rams. I don't know how indicative that is of what they'll be like going forward, because you're not going to face as many run defenses as good as the Rams week in, week out. The Titans schedule actually gets a lot easier.
It does, yeah.
Coming up. And Deontay Foreman's obviously going to be mixed in enough to be annoying to those fantasy managers that have Peterson and McNichols on their roster. I don't think there's an RB1 on the team at the moment.
I agree. Yeah.
I think there's some flex plays there.
I agree. 55 snaps last night, though. That's it. So
Yeah.
it was like, it's a sample size, but it's not a huge one.
Correct.
And this is a game that we thought maybe the reason why McNichols could be more involved in the passing game is it's competitive. They're either playing from behind or they're playing keep up. Instead, I know the Rams took an early lead. Next thing you know, though, Titans go up, pick six. They scored like 2 touchdowns in 30 seconds?
That's what it was. So they get an interception, and they're in Rams territory. I think it gets down to like the 5 or something
Yeah,
like
2-yard
that.
line. It was when the Matthews effort. What a weird play that was.
Super weird play, right, exactly. So they're within the 5. They cash that in quickly, and then a few plays later,
30
there's a
seconds
pick.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
it's
a
great.
pick 6, and so all of a sudden, the Titans have scored 2 touchdowns like on 3 offensive plays,
Yeah.
and so that obviously skews the game tremendously. There wasn't a ton of offensive production from the team. I mean, the Titans did okay moving the ball, but the Rams defense played well. I thought.
They were fine.
That loss
Their
wasn't on
fault
the
they
Rams
lost, totally,
defense.
Yeah. Ryan Tannehill had 14 fantasy points last night, Matthew. He had a rushing touchdown. That was good. I thought he was fine. Bad pick early in the game. Nothing special. They didn't, again,
They
hard
didn't
for
need
me.
to.
They didn't need to. But I will say, one thing that was good last night was 11 of his 27 passing attempts last night went to A.J. Brown. That
Sure.
was good. So that was the one takeaway that I was most encouraged by. Even
A.J. Brown looked like A.J. Brown, and it was nice to see Julio Jones just back, finishing the game, not getting hurt, catching what was thrown to him,
4 catches, though. Julio's a tough one, though, right? Because, he's had a couple huge games this year. He's been hurt a lot, and he's had a couple games where you're kind of like, I get why the league was kind of soft on him this offseason, right? They kind of cooled on him, right, Daniel?
Sure.
Yeah, so the league did cool on him a little bit.
That wasn't the question you're going to ask.
That wasn't the question I was going to ask, though.
Okay, what was the question?
No,
you
I
were
do
gonna
wonder. So, given what we saw, because this game, and like you guys have already said, this game was kind of weird. It's really hard to be able to take a lot away from it that we want to reflect forward because of the way that it worked out
ask?
defensively.
I have a way to reflect forward on it, though.
Okay, because please.
Stock up for Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown from last night, because you're right. Although it was a really good run defense, I don't think they're going to be nearly crazy thought here. They're not going to be nearly as effective running the football without Derrick Henry. They're going to have to throw it more.
Sure.
And I know it was just it's just 2 touchdowns, but think about the 2 plays that Ryan Tannehill scored a touchdown on last night. 1, he throws a 2-yard pass to the back left corner of the end zone.
Right.
2, naked bootleg on 4th and goal. What happens if Derrick Henry's on the field for either of those series?
He probably gets at least one of those.
He's probably scoring both of them, right? So I think there is reason to believe that stock goes up for Ryan Tannehill in the passing game, even if last night was not one of those efforts that you win your league of.
There's the one counterpoint to that. The one counterpoint to that, by the way, and it's one of the reasons why I loved Matthew Stafford this week. I'll own it. Just a bad call by me, right? I mean, I had Stafford as my number 2 quarterback this week. So, and one of the reasons why is because coming to this game, the Titans had been one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Every underlying metric, teams had scored tons of fantasy points against them, tons of yards, tons of receptions. They'd given up I believe the most yards, receptions, and fantasy points to opposing wide receivers coming to this game. And credit where credit is due. Titans defense looked awesome.
Yeah, they're
looked
so
awesome.
feisty, man. So impressive.
Super feisty. And so my point is, Field, is that if the Titans defense is going to play like that every week, they're not going to need to get into more pass-heavy mode, which you would have sort of expected with previous incarnations of the Titans defense earlier in the year when they were giving up a lot of points and yards.
Yep. Well, let's go to the Browns, who had their first game without Odell Beckham Jr. And to be clear, it's not like Odell Beckham Jr. was a huge part of this Browns offense when he was healthy. He was not anything close to what Derrick Henry was for the Titans offense. So I think there is a bit of treading lightly with whatever happened yesterday. But before we get to that offense, I thought there was an interesting update on Fantasy Football Now via Kimberly Martin about Kareem Hunt, Stephania, who I believe is eligible to play as soon as this Sunday against the Patriots. It does not sound like such will be the case.
Yeah, I wouldn't plan on it. Remember when he went out, we heard a timeline estimate of 4 to 6 weeks. So the injured reserve was a stash mechanism for him, but we never really expected him to return right away after that. And I was talking about the show yesterday. I reminded everyone he was banged up going into that game where he ended up with that calf injury, which by the looks of it looked quite serious. And so he had 3 body parts listed next to his name when he went on injured reserve. And this is a chance for him to really get right. And they're not going to bring him back too early from that type of injury.
It meant plenty of Nick Chubb yesterday, who was remarkable. He was tremendous. He was Nick Chubb.
By the way, he looks healthy.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Hashtag analysis.
Yeah, he was great.
Listen,
By the way, let's hear. Go
you
ahead,
know what?
Stephania.
All kidding aside, sometimes you don't really get a chance to see it. One of the things with soft tissue injuries is you really want to see things like burst and acceleration, especially when it's a player who's known for that, like Nick Chubb. And so when you saw him on that breakaway, still have that breakaway speed, no issues, that actually matters.
Have to love this, by the way.
I'm just trying to applaud Nick Chubb. I'll tell you this: like in a week in which pretty much every major fantasy star did nothing, Nick Chubb showed up and did what he was supposed to do.
He
was dominant.
He understood the assignment, yeah.
He did. He understood the assignment. That's exactly right. So did Joe Mixon. Congratulations to Joe Mixon did. Nick Chubb did. The running backs in Ohio.
Deontay Johnson will tonight.
And hopefully Deontay Johnson tonight. But yeah, a lot of fantasy players, superstars this week, did not understand the assignment. Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon did. Congrats to both of them. Thank you to both of them.
So from the runners to the receivers. And this week, Donovan Peoples-Jones is the sub of the week, brought to you by Captain Morgan, bench boring drinks, and sub in the captain on game day. Captain Morgan, the official spiced rum of the NFL. Donovan Peoples-Jones, and a hat tip to Mike Clay, who, after this news about OBJ came down on this show, said, hey, I'm not guaranteeing that anybody needs to be started this weekend, but I think there's a chance here for DPJ to step into a much more prominent role. He's flashed, could be sort of a post-hype sleeper here. And he did. 2 catches, 86 yards, long touchdown from Baker Mayfield, just 3 targets, Matthew. So it's hard to say for certain that he's going to have a weekly role that's good enough for fantasy relevance. But, hey, put him on the waiver wire just as like a stash put on the end of your bench. He was really, really the talk of the town during the preseason.
Yes, he was. And he's had some nice games here prior to – he got a little bit banged up. But remember, he caught that Hail Mary. He's had some flashy plays, and he's caught a couple of touchdowns so far this year. I actually tweeted out when the news of Odell Beckham Jr. was rumored to happen. He'd been, hey, stay away from the team. And it looked like, obviously, the end was near in terms of his tenure in Cleveland. I tweeted that out. I said something like, deeper league guys, keep an eye out for Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's somebody I've always liked. You and I talked about DPJ in the preseason, where you brought up the point, Field, and it was a very good one, which is like, hey, looking at the contract situation here with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr., at the end of this year, the Browns are going to have to make some tough decisions because they've got Baker, they've got Myles Garrett, they've got a lot of guys that they've got to take care of. And so, salary cap is a reality for every NFL team, and Cleveland's going to have to make some tough decisions, especially when it comes to their wide receiver room. And I wonder if both Juice Landry and OBJ are back with the Browns next year based on the contracts. Donovan Peoples-Jones is somebody really interesting for Dynasty. That was a point that we both made, but specifically led by you, Field, in the preseason. OBJ already not on the Browns.
That being said, so it was good. It was really good to see, and it was a huge day. Hard to predict that happening every single week. And the bigger takeaway from the passing game was that everybody ate yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Nobody had more than, I believe, 4 catches yesterday for the Browns. It was kind of just the usual Browns formula. You might get 8 combined catches from the tight ends. You might get 12 from the wide receivers. You might get 5 from the running backs. And they're going to run the football a bunch. That's their formula right now. So I'm still not sure. I don't believe any Browns wide receiver will be inside my top 40 this week.
I would agree with that, but I would say I think if I had to pick one for the rest of the season as the most upside, I prefer Donovan Peoples-Jones to Jarvis Landry. I don't think there's upside to Jarvis Landry. I think best case scenario is like that he's a solid, PPR guy that gets you 10 points in a week, and you hope that he gets into the end zone every once in a while. But Peoples-Jones is a big play guy. Also, by the way, for Dynasty League, I have him in the Dynasty League we're all in. But Anthony Schwartz, I think, is a really interesting rookie that's had a couple of nice flash plays for Cleveland so far this year. I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just gonna point this out here, though. A lot has been made over Baker's play that has been inconsistent so far this year, and no question, it has been. But one thing that was said to me by an insider, and again, I don't know if this is true or not, I'm just merely passing along, is that the rumor out of Cleveland was that Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't running the routes that he was assigned, that he was freelancing a lot. And so when somebody, if that is true, again, I don't know. I don't know what the plays are. I mean, you only see what the guy's running. But if that's true, even on some level, like if a player's not going where they're supposed to go,
makes life tough.
It makes life tough for the quarterback. And so that is one explanation as to maybe why Baker has performed statistically better when Beckham has not been in the lineup, because if everyone else is at least just running the routes they're supposed to run, it makes life easier for the passing offense. It makes life easier for Baker Mayfield. And let's face it, for as much criticism he's gotten this year, yesterday, Baker Mayfield looked great.
Yeah, he looked solid yesterday. Completed 2/3 of his passes, 218 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Against a tough defense. Against a Bengals defense that's played well this year.
Yeah, better improving defense. The Saints yesterday had their first game without Jameis Winston. Their first full game, I should say. It was Trevor Siemian, not Taysom Hill, who started. Siemian came on strong in the fourth quarter, completing 25 of his 41 passes. He did have 249 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns in a game they lost to Atlanta, Matthew. I don't know, man. I think we've kind of devolved this down to one player that matters in this offense, and that's it. It's Alvin Kamara. That's it.
Yeah. Now, we will see. The Saints are one of the rumored landing spots for Odell Beckham Jr.,
yes,
and that would be interesting.
Homecoming to Louisiana, where he's from.
Sure.
They need wide receivers in a major way.
Right. Obviously, no Michael Thomas for this season as
in.
well.
Yep. He wants to play for Contender. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, and Sean Payton is a veteran coach. That's a veteran organization that maybe, could handle somebody, a strong-willed personality like Beckham. Yep. So it makes a lot of sense on a lot of levels. So we'll see. What's interesting here is we saw some Taysom Hill, and this is a game they lost. And is Trevor Siemian the starting quarterback next week for the Saints? I don't think it's a given.
I think he is, but I'm saying that sort of uncertainly. I'm saying that there's trepidation in my voice for a reason. And I think if they had won that game yesterday over Atlanta, he probably is the starter again. Because they lost and the urgency kicks up a notch, maybe Taysom Hill is back under center. We'll evaluate that one throughout the week.
Kamara is the only person you really care about, but just if you're in a deeper league, if you're searching around, we'll see what happens with Beckham. But just it's worth noting that Deontay Harris now has 7 or more targets in consecutive games, 3 of his past 4. He winds up with double-digit fantasy points in this one. Again, I don't know that I put a ton of stock into it, but last 2 games under Trevor Siemian seems like they've looked for Harris a little bit. So
Pride of Assumption College, baby, up in Worcester, Mass.
There you go. I did not know that. Assumption College in Worcester, Mass.
Standout. We're going to talk about the Packers without Aaron Rodgers against the Chiefs in just a minute. But before we do that, support for this podcast and the following message comes from Supercuts. Hair, it always has a way of growing back faster than we want it to.
Not for all of us.
And somehow it can feel like we need more haircuts than we have time for.
I wish.
Luckily, Supercuts is here to make grabbing a haircut easy. Supercuts is here for you if you're someone who needs a haircut but doesn't think they have time for a haircut.
Oh, I've got time.
No more scouring the web for salons with availability. You can use the Supercuts app to find the location nearest to you and check in, or just walk in. Another bonus, the salon shows estimated wait times so you know exactly what you're in for. As for the cut itself, it's always super solid, thanks to Supercut's highly trained stylists. Get in, get out, and get to that thing you need a haircut for. Whether you've got a first date, or a vacation coming up, or you just want to look good, Supercuts makes getting a haircut effortless. It's not just any haircut, it's Supercuts. Check in now on the Supercuts app or on supercuts.com.
This episode is also brought to you by Captain Morgan. NFL fans know as the season gets underway, you got to have the right players for all 60 minutes to bring that spark. And sometimes you got to sub someone in to switch things up. Same thing goes for that drink in your hand on game day. So if you're looking to sub in something more refreshing, pour yourself a delicious, crisp Captain Morgan Original Spiced Rum and Ginger. Sub in the Captain. Captain Morgan, the official spiced rum of the NFL. Visit CaptainMorgan.com to find Captain near you. Drink responsibly. Captain Morgan Rum Company, New York, New York.
So the Packers got a glimpse of what life on the other side could look like, as no Aaron Rodgers yesterday as he remains in COVID-19 protocols. The earliest Aaron Rodgers can be activated from the COVID-19 list is Saturday. Matt LaFleur, their head coach, said very clearly yesterday, if he's good to go on Saturday, he's starting on Sunday against the Seahawks. No surprise there. Also because their backup quarterback, Jordan Love, stepped in, Matthew, and he got a little better as the game went on. He got very little help from his offensive line, but he was unsteady yesterday.
He looked bad. He looked not ready for prime time.
Right, yeah.
He just didn't. I mean, like, the Chiefs are not a dominating defense.
No.
The Chiefs came into that game as bottom 12 against the pass over the last 4 weeks. It's a team that had given up a ton of fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. It's not a defense that scares you. And Jordan Love did not look – he had one good drive. It was my take from that game.
Late in the game, yeah.
Late in the game, he had one good drive. But other than that, he did not look ready for prime time. And if I was a Packers fan, I would be freaking out about the future, about a world in which Aaron Rodgers is not quarterbacking that team. Now, I understand there's a lot of criticism surrounding Rodgers, and I get that. Believe me, I get that. But just talking about this from a purely fantasy football and NFL point of view, and because that's the bandwidth of this show, yeah, that was bad. It is that offense needs Aaron Rodgers.
In a bad way. A couple of surprises from yesterday were that Aaron Jones had zero involvement in the passing game. He had 0 catches yesterday. He had 53 rushing yards. Instead, it was A.J. Dillon who had a much bigger day. He had 4 catches yesterday, and he had 13 fantasy points, did Dillon. But we saw what really mattered, which was that as far as pass catchers go, Devontae Adams' value is going to go down with Jordan Love.
Yeah, I mean,
he had 14 targets yesterday, Matthew. That's great. He had 42 yards, 3 yards per target.
It was brutal. Again, Jordan Love looked terrible. Love looked terrible. I thought we had been done with it. I thought my work had been done, Field Yates. I thought that I thought I had accomplished it. My life's mission, my life's work. It had been a 3-year project. I felt like I finally got there. But we're back. Free Aaron Jones. Hashtag free Aaron Jones. We need to take to the streets. We need to put up signs. We need to start a social media campaign. We need clever ads. For the love of God, we need influencers to help us out with this. 1 rushing touchdown in his last 6 games. His 5th game this year with under 15 fantasy points. He had the same number of total touches as A.J. Dillon. Free Aaron Jones. Free Aaron Jones. Take to the streets, America. Free Aaron Jones. Who's with me? Let's go.
Didn't we get a sign for him at a WWE event?
Yes, we sure did. That was awesome.
Maybe
Let's get
we
another
need
one of
that.
those. Fans are back at WWE events now.
Exactly. So, just
was that
putting that
College
out
Game
there.
Day too?
We got a free Aaron Jones at College Game Day. We got a free Aaron Jones at a WWE event. And we also got a free Aaron Jones sign at a Packers Monday Night Football game.
Standing behind
we got
the-
a guy
behind the goalpost.
behind the goalposts. And so when they were Mason Crosby was kicked to the next point, guy with his child. And wrote in, and I think we put him in the man's league. I think he got
Yeah.
I think
Anyway,
he got in the
yeah.
man's league because of that.
Agree with that.
So anyway, yeah. So once again, 0601 Nation has helped us out before, and I'm asking again, hashtag free Aaron Jones.
Okay, so and we understand if Aaron Rodgers starts on Sunday, then everything's back to normal. But
Not everything,
you
but
think.
yes, everything in terms of the Packers
of
NFL
fantasy,
offense.
yes. So if
That
he
part is
doesn't
back to
though,
normal.
Thoughts, yeah.
is there any chance that you're benching any of these other players, or are all these players still too good to be benched?
It'd have to be more than one bad game. And I do think, and I know Packers fans that are listening right now are probably going to be disappointed hearing what you had to say about how Jordan Love played yesterday. To reiterate, he got no help from the offensive line. Matt LaFleur after the game said, I had a bad game plan for all the stuff the Chiefs were doing with their zero blitz concepts, which is when you bring the house and you say, beat us with man-to-man coverage. So it'll get better, I believe, for Jordan Love. I'm not saying that the Seahawks are decidedly better or worse defense than the Chiefs. I think it will be better, though, just with one more week underneath his belt, Daniel. But mostly I'm hoping that Aaron Rodgers is available in Week 10 because, hard for me to envision like a 25-point outing from Devontae Adams is like something I kind of like routinely count on with Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Hard for me to envision a world where he scores 25 fantasy points with Jordan Love next week.
1,000% agree with that. For whatever it's worth, I believe Adam Schefter and Chris Mortensen, I believe they said this on Sunday Night Countdown. Keep me honest if they did not. I don't want to attribute words to them that they didn't say, but I'm paraphrasing here. But I believe the expectation is that there will be no suspension from the NFL given
You can't. It's
given Aaron Rodgers.
It's a team. It's not a personal. It would not
they'll
be
get
a
fined,
personal,
but they won't.
right.
Yeah.
Yes,
It'd be a
there'll be
team
some fines, but
violation.
I would think. Yeah.
There's potential for some fines, but he will not miss any time due to potential violations of COVID protocols with the NFL.
Okay, let's move forward here. And as much as the Packers offense struggle without their star quarterback, the Cardinals, not so much.
Oh,
Why are you clapping? That's mean.
I'll tell you why I'm clapping. You know
clap
why?
Tell us
for-
why.
I didn't
Tell us
clap
why.
for you.
Tell us why.
Do you know why, Stephania? You know why. Why don't you tell the good people of America why?
Can I
Oh,
clap?
but I know why. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Can I
at
say
my
why?
expense.
Their own
I wasn't
team.
even
I
there.
know,
Can I say why?
Yeah, go ahead,
Do you-
Daniel. What do you
I
got?
mean-
Yeah, I was watching
yeah.
Fantasy Football Now Sunday morning, ESPN 2.
Begrudgingly, huh?
And
We
listen,
appreciate that you watch.
I know. And Matthew went on this big thing about how Colt McCoy he brought out his
Professional
foghorn
quarterback.
leghorn voice
Cole McCoy, formerly of
of
The Washington
every
Washington
team in the
football.
NFL,
Well,
basically.
but,
half the NFL.
Yeah, come
Matthew
on.
cared because he was
Giants,
Washington.
name it.
A
Right,
zillion
right.
teams.
Here's the thing that I don't understand.
No, tell them what I did, though, first.
So you guaranteed that he would
No,
get
he
at
did not
least
guarantee it.
he
guaranteed
guaranteed that he would get
Leghorn.
at least 16 fantasy points.
15.
15. And he ended up getting 16.3.
Yep.
So
Sailed past it.
way ahead.
Well, hang on now. Don't get snarky with me because I'll tell you what, Field Minister Yates.
Tell me what.
This came up during a discussion about you talking about how you thought Jordan Love was going to just stomp all over the Chiefs and he was going to have a monster game. And I brought up
Crush
the fact
them.
that I think Colt McCoy was going to have a very solid game and that he would be he was a
Yes.
professional quarterback
Yep.
and that he was going to run that Cardinals offense. It was a fantasy friendly offense. He had playmakers around him and that is Colt. I said, like, is Colt McCoy great? No, he is not, but he is a professional. You said he stinks, and I said he's a solid backup quarterback, and he's going to get you 15 fantasy points. He's going to get you
how I
15.
like
This is
You know
what I said.
who-
I said he's going to get you 15 fantasy points today, and I guarantee it. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And you know what he
Forgot to
did? He
mention-
got you 15 fantasy points.
The 49ers defense totally helped him with that. I mean,
What?
this was not all
Ever.
on Colt
Also,
McCoy. This
for the
was
record,
terrible.
I do feel like this is sort of like Cordero Patterson 2.0 for you, Matthew. You were only like 10 years early on Colt McCoy, and now, finally, he has delivered after 10 years in the
I've
NFL.
never thought Colt McCoy was going to be a great professional football player, but listen.
This
you know,
offense still moved with him under center.
I think he is somebody that I've watched over the years, and I think that I believe he was drafted by the Browns. He
was.
got
Second
right,
round
and
pick,
so,
yep.
right. It was in it like that's such a brutal organization for so many years, and like I just think Colt McCoy never had a chance. Like I think he was a good college player, and
Great college player.
At University of
Great
Texas, he was
college player.
fantastic, right? And so like I felt like the kid never got a chance, and so anyway, I think he gets the short shrift a lot of times. I think he's a very solid player, and
whatever.
I knew he was going to be fine. Yes, I knew he was going to be. I knew he was going to do what he was going to do. I thought he was better a streamer than Jordan Love. And by the way, I was right on that. So anyway,
yeah. Let's just get
Stephania,
this out of the way.
Cardinals not on-
the Foghorn Leghorn guarantee.
Wait a second.
Remains undefeated.
I thought you had Jordan Love ranked one spot ahead of Colt McCoy.
He did.
So then you didn't. Then you got it right, but then you also got it wrong.
Daniel, we call this covering our bases.
Oh,
Stephania, let me ask you about Chase
They do it
Edmonds
in Vegas.
because
Yeah.
not only did the Cardinals do this yesterday without Kyler Murray
know.
and DeAndre Hopkins
course.
and AJ Green,
Why
they
not?
effectively did it without Chase Edmonds as well.
They did. He played one play. He ran it for 3 yards, and then he limped to the side of the field, labeled as questionable to return because of an ankle, did not come back to the game. Reports this morning, Adam Schefter saying that sprained ankle and more tests being done, as you would expect. That's what happens on Monday. More tests being done to examine his ankle and get back to us on the details of it and the severity of it. But it sounds like there is certainly some concern about the health of Chase Edmonds, if not for next week. Potentially for several.
Yeah.
I think, look, it was the James Conner day, and he ran all over the 49ers. So have at it, Matthew.
Ran all
All
amazing.
over.
173 total yards, 5 catches. He had 3 total touchdowns. He's now up to 11 touchdowns on the season, Matthew. What a great story. And I got to take 30 seconds here, less than that. Like, we're talking about Colt McCoy and James Conner.
Yeah.
How about Cardinals GM Steve Keim finding two unbelievable values? James Conner making $1.75 million this year. He was left for, just the scrap heap.
Yeah.
He had the injury during the offseason. He's looked remarkable this year.
Yeah,
Colt McCoy comes up and wins a game for him, complete over 80% of his passes.
Not for nothing, but he brought A.J. Green, who has served a purpose with them as well. I mean, the last game wasn't great, but A.J. Green has bailed them out a couple of times this year as well.
But really smart. Like, I underestimated how good this roster will be this year. One of the best stories of the season.
Hey, to your point, and so credit to the Cardinals front office, no question, Field, but also credit to James Conner, who took a one-year prove-it deal and said, you know what, I'm going to prove it. I get that what the NFL thinks of me and thinks about my injury history, and I'm going to prove it. And through 10 weeks of the season, or I guess we're heading into week 10. Yep. So through 9 weeks of the season, he has absolutely proved it. So James Conner, by the way, I don't believe is 100% rostered in ESPN leagues.
He's worth a look, but it's
high.
Yep.
It's probably 80%, I think, but like worth a look just to see if he is there. Will Eno Benjamin make your a list, Field Yates? Because I don't think I think you'll see some Benjamin if Edmonds misses some time here.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's a deeper league ad, but
yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that I will get there.
I think he's a deeper league guy. Yeah. For a standard ESPN 10-team league, you're probably not adding him. Yeah. But if you're in one of these deeper leagues where like anyone with a pulse is worth rostering, Benjamin is suddenly worth rostering if Edmonds is going to miss time, because I don't think one of the reasons why Connor's been so effective, it's not going to be James Conner playing 100% of the snaps. They want to keep him healthy. They want to manage his workload.
He is rostered in 82% of leagues, but was only started in 34% of leagues
that number
yesterday.
will go to basically 100%.
Yeah, that's going to jump up.
Right? So we'll keep an eye on just how much time Chase Edmonds could miss, but as Stephania said, plan for it at least this week, if not longer. In terms of pass catchers yesterday, Christian Kirk had yet another good game, I should say, 6 catches for 91 yards. He also had a near touchdown pass to Antoine Wesley. The ball was ruled down at the 1-yard line. Christian Kirk, as Matthew has said several times this year, if you have Christian Kirk, the rule is this. You just start him every week, because you can't count on when it's going to be a good week, when it's going to be a bad week. But the numbers say, on average, it's going to be more likely to be a good week than a bad week so far this season. I'm defining a good week as 10 or more fantasy points.
1,000%. By the way, I just blanked on the name. The Christian Kirk, the touchdown pass was to
Antoine Wesley.
Antoine Wesley, thank you very much. I just want to give a shout out real quickly to Mike Clay.
So good, yeah.
Who noted on Fantasy Football Now Sunday morning, he also put this out on Twitter, that Antoine Wesley had a monster year at Texas Tech under Cliff Kingsbury and would be playing in the DeAndre Hopkins role in this offense with Hopkins out, and that he was a sleeper. And by the way, Wesley had a nice little game. Anyway, just a really deep find by Mike Clay. So I just want to give a shout out and give props to that, because that was a great call by him on Fantasy Football Now.
We have 3 minutes left. We're going to cover Monday Night Football quickly. Stephania, we'll start with you. David Montgomery, do you think he'll be active tonight for the Bears?
Yes. I don't have all my little notes ready, but
Bears had Coach
David Montgomery.
Really good chance,
yes. I'm sorry. I'm still
for whatever
catching
it's worth. I literally sorry, Stephania.
No, I was just going to say he was out after he had that knee hyperextension, and there was a timeline given initially of 4 to 5 weeks, and we're kind of hitting around that point, and they feel comfortable with how he has looked. You always wonder, after an injury like that, how much do they let him go, assuming he plays? I think he could get a decent amount of work as long as he's not having any discomfort or anything that looks, concerning to them during the course of the game.
Dilemma, Matthew. I'm gonna hit you with this one.
Right.
All right. I have David Montgomery. I grabbed Khalil Herbert because of the Damian Williams injury after the David Montgomery injury. You've got both Herbert and David Montgomery on your roster. You're down by, let's call it 8 points, somewhere in the range of it's not, you don't need a Hail Mary, but you also can't afford a stinker. Which of those two are you playing if you have one spot left?
This is a total guess.
Yep.
I'm just going to own that. This is a total guess.
Okay.
But I think I'm playing Herbert.
So am I.
We haven't seen Montgomery. Do they ease him back in? Do they give him the full workload? My expectation here is that I feel pretty confident that Herbert's going to have some sort of a role.
I agree.
He's just been too good. I don't think that Montgomery in his first game back immediately gets the full workload. So I think I feel like the worst case scenario is that Herbert Montgomery split. best case scenario is it's like it's 70-30 Herbert to Montgomery just because it's Montgomery's first game back. I think it's more likely a 50-50 split or 70-30 to Herbert than it is 70-30 Montgomery to Herbert.
Yep, I agree.
Anything's
I agree.
possible.
Yeah, anything's
Listen,
possible,
it's the
totally.
it's the Bears,
And
and
they
who
love
knows?
David Montgomery.
They love David
Matt Nagy
Montgomery.
loves him. He's a really good player too.
He's a really good player, and it's on the road at Pittsburgh. This is gonna be a tough game against a tough defense. Monday Night Football, and primetime game. Steelers crowd, they're going to be into it, but I wouldn't feel good about it. But you're asking me directly, I would play Herbert over Montgomery until I'm proven otherwise. For whatever it's worth, just got an alert that says NFL Network is also reporting that Bears are expected to activate Montgomery off the injured reserve to play tonight.
I feel like maybe this is just me, but mentally, if Khalil Herbert goes off and I had Khalil Herbert and then started David Montgomery over him, that would bother me more than if David Montgomery goes off and I started Khalil Herbert over him, because I like you're saying, I'm not expecting a whole lot from David Montgomery, right? We're going to see him out there on the field, but I think for me, like there's that like mental aspect of like which one's going to hurt less. If you make the wrong call, which one's going to hurt you less? I like Khalil Herbert.
Last one here, Matthew.
And if Herbert Herbert's looked fantastic.
Yeah,
that's
if he
the
didn't
other
look
thing.
this way,
Like,
agreed.
Herbert has looked legit fantastic over the last 3-4 weeks, however long it's been.
Last one here. Do we come out of tonight feeling more optimistic about Justin Fields or less optimistic against this really good Steelers defensive front?
Less optimistic.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be tough sledding tonight for that Bears offense in general. So
I tend to think this is just, I don't have stats to prove me out. Maybe Thirsty Kyle can look this up. This is the kind of thing he'll probably do like in 30 seconds. But I tend to subscribe to the theory that I never like going up against defenses that are at home in a primetime game, especially off of a bye. The Steelers have had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. Primetime games, the crowd gets really into it. Not that crowds don't normally, but like, all the lights and there's media trucks around and there's focus on it. It's a primetime game. Players know when they're in the national spotlight.
they're good too,
and they're
There's
good
seizing
as
opportunities
well.
where the AFC is all of a sudden wide open for them. I mean,
Correct.
I'm with you. I think this is like a grinded out win, which Deontay Johnson scores 19 fantasy
You
points.
need 19. Your hashtag Monday Night Miracle tonight is you need Deontay Johnson.
18.03 fantasy points from Deontay.
18.03 fantasy points. As I told you before the show, I like your chances better than your opponents. I'd rather be rooting for Deontay Johnson to get 18 points against the Bears secondary that has
Hard
been uneven
charge.
this year.
War room luck, please.
So
I don't ask for much.
rooting for the Irish Twins here as well. But what a crazy week, by the way. By the way, our friend Kevin Pulsford just texted me. Cole McCoy, James Conner, Adrian Peterson, Jordan Howard.
It's like 2017.
2017,
Yeah,
exactly.
all over again.
Really
They're
quickly-
all back, which means Ben will go off tonight.
Yay!
Ben was good in 2017.
Yes, he was. Closing out the show, I just want to give a shout out to Brooke Pryor, who
Yes.
covers everything Steelers with us. She put out
Does a
an
great
awesome
job.
argonna about Najee
Najee
Harris.
Harris. I was just,
If
I
you
was
were
gonna,
not
I'm
a
gonna
fan of
retweet
him
it, yeah.
before, you will so be now. Go check it out.
You
Brooke just wrote an
have to
awesome
check
article.
out this story. It's
So
awesome.
yeah, you can follow Brooke on Twitter at BE Pryor.
B.E. Pryor, correct.
Pryor.
Yep.
So shout out to Brooke, who does a great job covering the Steelers. And yes, absolutely check out her article on Najee Harris on ESPN.com now.
For Matthew and Stephania and Daniel, I am a pajama-wearing field. We'll talk to you guys on Tuesday. Monday Night Football recap, waiver wire, and so much more to get to. We'll talk to you then.
Kelly from YouTube, we love you. Peace out.